A U.S. military strike, carried out with frankly stunning speed and precision, has just completely redrawn the political map of an entire hemisphere. We're talking about the capture of a sitting head of state, and the consequences of this are really only just beginning to ripple out.
So picture this. It happened in the middle of the night. On January 3rd, 2026, U.S. Special Forces fly into the capital of Venezuela and they grab its president, Nicolás Maduro. Now, this wasn't some kind of covertly sponsored coup or a local uprising. Nope. This was a direct, overt military action, something we have literally never seen in modern history.
So to really understand how we got to this point, and more importantly, where this is all going, we're going to break it all down. First up, we'll look at the anatomy of the raid itself. Then, we're going to dive into the official reasons the U.S. is giving. After that, we'll see how Venezuela and the rest of the world are reacting. And finally, we'll tackle the biggest question of all: what happens now? The whole mission was codenamed Operation Absolute Resolve, and honestly, it was a masterclass in military coordination. Let's just walk through the timeline of how this all went down. I mean, look at how tight that window was. We're talking less than 6 hours from the presidential go order to having Maduro extracted and over the ocean. And then how did the world find out? Not through some formal diplomatic announcement, but through a social media post. Absolutely wild. Now, calling something like this off required a massive, multi-branch operation. And we're talking about deploying some of the most advanced and frankly scariest military tech on the face of the earth. Just let this one number sink in for a second. More than 150 aircraft, that's bombers, stealth fighters, drones, helicopters, you name it, all converging on one target from 20 different bases. The logistical complexity is just staggering to think about. And this was a true joint force. The Army's elite Delta Force led the actual assault on the ground, and they were supported by this massive curtain of air power from the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. But the very first move was completely silent. U.S. Cyber and Space Commands essentially blinded Venezuelan air defenses before anyone even knew they were coming. And to help with the official law enforcement story, you had agents from the CIA, the DEA, and even the FBI's hostage rescue team right there on the ground. But, of course, an operation of this scale is never bloodless. It always comes with a human cost. Early reports confirmed that 55 Venezuelan and Cuban military personnel were killed defending the compound and other key sites. Tragically, 2 civilians were also killed in the crossfire. On the U.S. side, 7 soldiers were injured, but there were no American fatalities. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, he really didn't mince words about the risks involved. He basically said that every single element, from the cyber guys to the helicopter pilots, had to work absolutely perfectly. The margin for error here was basically 0. Which brings us to the huge question: why? And maybe just as important, why now? Well, the Trump administration has laid out a few different reasons for an action that has pretty much stunned the entire planet. Okay, so the legal cornerstone of the whole U.S. argument is this phrase: narco-terrorism. See, the Justice Department had already indicted Maduro years ago, accusing him of running something called the Cartel of the Suns, basically a network of corrupt officials trafficking drugs. Now, this framing is so critical because it lets the U.S. say, hey, this isn't an act of war against a sovereign leader. This is a law enforcement action against a wanted criminal. When you break it down, the official rationale really stands on 3 pillars. First is security, going after drug trafficking and gangs. Second is migration, trying to stop the flood of nearly 8 million people leaving Venezuela. And the third, and this one is huge, is energy, a direct claim on Venezuela's massive oil reserves, which happen to be the largest in the world. And President Trump himself made that energy part crystal clear. This quote really tells you everything you need to know about a core piece of the justification. It's this narrative that U.S. companies were the rightful builders and owners of Venezuela's oil industry, and that this operation was, at least in part, about taking back what they see as stolen property. So how did the rest of the world take this news? Well, as you can probably guess, the response was immediate. It was intense, and it was deeply polarized, both inside Venezuela and all across the globe. Inside Venezuela, the country's deep political divisions just completely shattered. The government that's left, with Vice President Delcy Rodriguez quickly sworn in as acting president, is calling it a kidnapping. But at the same time, exiled opposition leaders like Maria Corina Machado are framing it as a moment of liberation, a chance to finally start over and rebuild. The global reaction was just as split. You've got the UN, the EU, and major powers like China and Russia all condemning the strike. Latin America is also split down the middle, with countries like Brazil and Mexico condemning it, but a smaller group like Argentina and Ecuador supporting it. And meanwhile, Venezuela's direct neighbors, they've just gone on high alert, bracing for whatever comes next. So with Maduro in U.S. custody, the entire world is now asking, what happens now? The aftershocks are already hitting, everywhere from global financial markets to foreign policy think tanks. Morgan Stanley put out this really fascinating analysis of the market reaction. Get this, Venezuelan bonds, which have been considered junk for years, actually rallied on the news. Investors are betting on a more stable U.S.-backed future. Gold, the classic safe haven asset, ticked up because of all the uncertainty. And oil prices saw a short-term spike, but analysts think they could actually drop in the long term if all that Venezuelan oil comes back online. Among the policy experts, two big competing ideas have started to emerge. On one side, you have analysts from places like Chatham House warning this could be a quagmire, that the U.S. is risking another forever war like in Iraq or Afghanistan. But on the other side, some are arguing the Venezuelan state is way more resilient than people think. And from their perspective, the fact that the U.S. chose a surgical decapitation strike instead of a full invasion is actually a sign of weakness, not strength. And this second analysis draws on a really surprising historical parallel, the 1918 treaty where the brand new Soviet government gave up huge chunks of territory to Germany just to survive. The theory is that Venezuela's remaining leadership might now make similar economic concessions, like giving up access to oil, just to preserve their political structure and live to fight another day.
And that's really the crucial point here, isn't it? The U.S. removed a leader, but it didn't remove the state that he built. The government in Caracas is still there, the military is still intact, and the political movement he led still has millions of followers. So the question we're all left with is this: does this kind of surgical strike represent a whole new model for U.S. intervention? Or is this just the opening chapter of a much longer and much more unpredictable conflict?